The question I have for you now is, can they make this playoff run? Can they get there? Can they play meaningful games if Juraj Slafkovsky doesn't level up? Let's go through the numbers. The Canadiens' 20-year-old top-line forward has played 36 games, has 21 points and 4 goals. He's a -10. Who cares about that? Playing 16 and a half minutes a night. Saturday in the come-from-behind win over Colorado, he played less than 13 and a half minutes, okay? And didn't see him in overtime. You saw him not really celebrating with his teammates, and I don't know how comfortable I am reading too much into him sitting at his locker stall while everybody's giving Dobesh the MVP glasses and they're having fun and they're celebrating. He doesn't even crack a smile. He gets out of that little 5-man huddle right away with Dvorak and Suzuki and Caulfield. Walk me through what you're seeing from Juraj Slafkovsky, because I think I know what I'm watching. I'm curious what you see, and can they get there if this is the production they're getting from number 20?
Well, I guess they can, because, we're talking about that incredible run of the past month, and it's with Slav not really contributing for the most part in a really meaningful way. But it is a cause for concern. I mean, it's and it's kind of, it's an odd one because, people still say, and after he got benched last night, people like, keep in mind he's only 20, and that's true. I mean, you got to keep that in mind, but also keep in mind that it's his 3rd season, right? So he's not an inexperienced guy, and I do think it's sort of, you go back and this is what you do. You look back and you say, did they make all the right decisions with him? And you still wonder if they didn't move him up too quickly and bring him in that first season when he really was not ready to play in the NHL, and that hurt him. And last season was so weird where he played like we're seeing now for the first half of last season, and then he turned it around in a way that was unbelievable and got roughly 40 points in 40 games. And so everyone was sort of saying, oh, well, this will happen again. Well, here we are. So it's January, it's early January, and he's still looking terrible. And you know what? I mean, you do have to interpret, we're not in the room, but you do interpret the body language and even on the ice, right? I mean, it's funny because at one point it was him and Doc, 2 big, like, power forwards. That's what those 2 guys are supposed to be. And Doc has turned it around mostly for the moment, and he's not perfect, but he's really, it's night and day. And Slafkovsky still hasn't, and he's not using his size. And it's weird, right? Like, you're like, surely if you and I are sitting here saying that, and everyone on every bar stool and every Twitter stool in the city is saying that, then presumably the coaching staff is telling them that's going to be your game, to use your size. And we've seen it. There are moments when you see it where he just holds the guys off and gets the puck to either Suzuki or Caulfield. And even more disappointing is they put him on, because you could have said, oh, he was on that line with Doc and it was just a disaster. Yeah. Well, now he's on with Cole and Nick, Suzuki, and it's still not working. And I mean, it's definitely a cause for concern. Like, because I don't think you can just say, oh, that's the Slafkovsky model, is he turns it around in the second half, because we've seen so little this year. I mean, 4 goals was the kind of ice time that this guy gets, and he was on the second, and now he's on the first line. He was on the first wave of the power play, and it's like 4 goals is absolutely unacceptable. And it seems like, with Doc, it seemed like he needed to get his confidence. It doesn't seem like Slav has that at all. And he is 20 years old. And, they often say big players take longer to develop. But I mean, again, I go back to a truism that sort of guides how I look at everything in sports, is it's just about the results, and you can claim it's, oh yeah, they develop slower, but the results aren't there. It's simply not good enough. And if I'm in Canadiens management, a scary thought for many of the people in the world, it's like, man, we just gave this guy, a ton of money, and maybe we made a mistake, and maybe we picked the wrong guy. Like, and you can say, oh, stop it. No, like, we'll see in 2 years from now if it should have been Cooley or Slafkovsky. And right now, it's not looking good. I mean, what do you think? Do you see him turning it around? I mean, there's no signs of it.
Well, you can even look at Shane Wright and the trajectory he's taken and the path he's taken to the National Hockey League, right? Like when I watch Slafkovsky play, what seems clear to me is this, that he earned a spot to break camp as a Canadian. And I don't think management felt pressure, exterior pressure or internal, because he was the number one pick on a rebuilding team equals he has to make the National Hockey League because that's what number ones do, right? So I don't believe that there was pressure inside or outside. But what I do believe has happened and what is happening now, and I don't think you can walk it back. I think you're in this spot, and I'm not so sure what the options are because they're trying to coach him up while he plays in the National Hockey League. And I'm going to give you an example, and that example is Logan Mailloux, who recently was taken off the first wave of the power play in Laval because the Rocket had been struggling. And they want Logan Mailloux to work on the defensive weaknesses of his game.
Right.
And so that's what they're doing with him. And I think that's where the mistake lies in Juraj Slafkovsky, is that he didn't have the opportunity in a lower league to go out there, make mistakes, don't repeat those mistakes, learn from them, and go out and play in this league. Because when I watch him play, when I watched him on Friday night, where he's bent over at the waist, long reach, not running into guys, like gliding into checks, right? And then I'm watching him Saturday. I see a guy who's thinking to not make a mistake. And whenever I've spoken to NHL players, whether it's a Chris Nyland or a PJ Stock or anybody that I've run into that's played in the National Hockey League, and they tell me about prospects, you know what they always say, Brendan? The common takeaway is the difference between the A and the NHL. You got no time. You got no time.
Correct.
You got the puck. You got to make it's got to be instinctual. And now I think he thinks and then reacts. And when those two things happen, it's over. He doesn't have a chance to make the right play 90% of the time. And I think it's hurting his confidence. That's what I believe. And how can you can't walk the dog back? You can't put it back. You're not going to send him to Laval. You're going to send him on a conditioning stint, Caden Primo style. Like,
no, they're in a very
no,
they're between a rock and a hard place with Slafkovsky. And I've always said, and I still maintain this, I believe in the guy. I do. And I mean, could be proven wrong, but I believe in the guy. I think we've seen enough to know that he can do incredible things. I mean, I think, like, you know, this is one of these stories where part of the problem is that he's a number one draft choice. That's not a good thing in the Slafkovsky career, because he's not, you know, it was not a strong year. Like in most years, he wouldn't have been number one. He would have just been somewhere in the top 10. And so that added pressure has not been a plus for him, you know, and he's not going to be, even though the people like me that really like Slafkovsky, he's not going to be a superstar. He's going to be, ideally, if it works out, a very good power forward who gets maybe 25 goals consistently, but plays a really good game and uses his body. And let's face it, Canadien, I mean, it's a pretty rare type of forward that they've had in the last 20 to 25 years. So that would be great. But yeah, so probably there were developmental mistakes, but as you say, that's been done. And so I don't know. And you know what? I mean, like clearly, like the takeaway from this weekend's games, it was a terrible weekend for Slafkovsky and a pretty good one for the Canadiens, because they didn't play a bad game in Chicago. They came across a really hot goalie and they played a great game in Denver, but he really didn't play well. And the coach is getting frustrated, and it's not the first time he benched him. And, you know, he doesn't look happy as Slafkovsky, and the coach is clearly not happy. This is not like, if there's one thing Martin St. Louis wants, he wants consistent effort from the players. And like, what do you do with the guy? If like you say, you can't send him back to Laval for a conditioning stint. You're going to start to get frustrated with him and put him on the bench. And do you put him down? It's hard to imagine, because it's really, you know what, because as we said, if you know, near the top of this conversation, so lines 3 and 4 are going great.
That's
so
it.
You can't really move him anywhere.
Correct.
So what do you do with them? And I'm sure, like, we're not in on those practices to see what they're saying on the ice, but clearly they're telling him all these things and it's not working. it's a dilemma, and it's more than, and because the other thing
It's
too,
a real dilemma. It's a real. You brought up the depth. The depth. You're not taking Heineman. You're not moving Anderson. You're not moving Armia. You're not moving Dvorak. Newhook might be the answer there if you're going to move a couple of pieces on the chessboard. But I think you're changing 4 quarters for $1. It's not. It's not
well,
like
that's it. I mean, Newhook is still, let's face it, not exactly firing
Yeah.
on all cylinders either. He's gotten a bit better, but so that's it. So what do you do? And if even you put him down and switch them with Heineman or something like that, I mean, it's like yeah, it's not going to work for that for the bottom 6. And then how's it going to help Slaf? They're playing 7 minutes a night. It's not.
How do you feel about sink or swim? How do you feel about that? Like there's part of me that I can subscribe to that. Listen, we gave you 61 million reasons why we love you, brother. Go fight. Yeah. Like, you can't look to dad. If dad is Martin St. Louis, you can't ask dad to bail you out of trouble again. Like, you're 20 years old. They gave you 61 million bucks in an extension because they clearly believe in you. Like, fight. Like, I hate to say it, but like, man up. Figure it out, brother.
And it's just weird. But because you would think that, like, it's the old line, if one thing isn't working, do it another way. And so just forget about scoring goals then, and just go out and use your size. But it's a weird thing, like, you think, like, look how good Josh Anderson's playing, who's like, has nowhere near the skill set of Slafkovsky. But last season, when he was playing badly, I'm sure he knew what he needed to do, but he couldn't do it. And it was a whole season that was just an out-and-out disaster. And that's what it looks like with Slafkovsky. Like, obviously must know what he needs to do, and he just can't do it. I mean, I find it enigmatic how you don't just, if you can't put the puck in the net, like 4 goals is like, it's almost absurd how, look at how many goals Jake Evans is scoring with so much less quality ice time.
Yeah.
So why don't you just go out and hit guys? You got the size to do it. You can do it. We've seen you do it. And you know what? That would be a very useful thing in a line with 2 super high skill players in Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield. Like, obviously Caulfield doesn't hit at all. I mean, Suzuki had a couple of great hits over the weekend where he really railed into some people in Chicago.
Kucherov.
Yeah. Kucherov was amazing. For not a big guy, but a tough guy. But you know what? But they're skill players. They're like, you saw that pass from Suzuki to Caulfield.
On the 1-1 goal. Yeah, exactly.
My God. I mean, the skill set on both of those guys. So if you've got 2 high skill guys there, and you can have Slaf just forget about getting any points and just messing it up, and only fighting, but just going into the corners and getting in the way of players. Like, what? Like, that's not even skill. Like, you don't even need skill to do. You're 6'4". That's just, I mean, and if we're scratching our heads, just imagine how they feel, in the coaching staff and the management suites at the Bell Center, because there is so much riding on this guy, right? If that turns out to be a bust, that's one of the big moves of this regime. That's the
first one. It's the first one, right?